Can Japan's married women finally keep maiden names after business lobbies push for new law? The Keidanren says the current law prohibiting Japanese women from keeping their maiden names is harming the nation's business. Japan's conservative politicians have been resistant to change as they claim changing the law would undermine the family unit. A campaign by women in Japan to obtain legal equality for their identities has received a boost after the head of the nation's largest business lobby expressed support for a change in the law that would allow women to keep their maiden names after marriage. Campaigners say Japan is the only country in the world that obliges married couples to have the same surname, and unsurprisingly, the man's family name is overwhelmingly the one chosen. Activists say it is a patriarchal remnant of the legal system held in place by conservative male politicians. But the control exercised by those men is coming to an end, activists say, pointing out that if the head of the influential Japan Business Federation, Keidanren, has come around to the idea of women keeping their maiden names, it is only a matter of time before the traditionalists relent. Keidanren chairman Masakazu Tokuro on Tuesday expressed his position, which has been the subject of intense debate for nearly 20 years, telling a press conference, "I personally think it should be done. I want it to be implemented as a top priority to support women's working styles." Keidanren has announced it is drawing up a paper to recommend that the law be amended to allow for different surnames, and that it would be submitted to the government later this year. Tokuro also said he was surprised at why the question has been left hanging for so long, after a Justice Ministry panel recommended in 1996 that the Civil Code be amended to allow for separate surnames. The panel's recommendations did not go further, as conservative members of the Diet indicated they would fight it because it would undermine the cohesion of the family unit and weaken traditional values. These people have always rejected efforts to change the law and allow equality because they are traditionalists and believe that a unified name is important to consolidating the idea of the family, said Hiromi Murakami, a professor of political science at the Tokyo campus of Temple University. They overlook just how inconvenient the law is for so many women, she told This Week in Asia, pointing to the need to transfer bank, passport and countless other documents over to a new name. But if Keidanren is behind the idea, then I believe a majority in the government and the ruling Liberal Democratic Party will finally listen, she said. There are still a lot of conservatives in the Diet and I expect there will be resistance to change, so I would describe myself as skeptically optimistic. An editorial in the Mainichi newspaper on February 12 called on the government to summon political courage to change the law, pointing out that Keidanren is claiming that the issue is harming the nation's business. The organization has received complaints from foreign firms that using a professional name that is different from a legal name has caused problems ranging from women being unable to enter public facilities abroad to being refused accommodation at hotels. Contracts have also been rejected as the signature is not the same as the passport name. But the issue extends beyond work and daily life, the paper said. One's name is integral to their identity. Many feel they have lost a part of themselves, as if their lifetime of achievements has been denied or erased by changing their surname. Studies suggest the public supports the change, with a 2022 survey by the National Institute of Population and Social Security Research showing that 61% of people were in favor of allowing married couples to have different surnames. Among companies, 84% said people should be able to keep the names they had at birth, according to a study by the Institute of Labor Administration. An increasing number of women are unofficially switching back to using their former family names, causing companies enormous confusion, said Sumi Kawakami, a lecturer at Yamanashi Gakuin University who focuses on women and gender issues. First, companies need to accommodate women's need to get paid to an account that's not in their registered names, as Japanese banks normally require women to change their names after marriage, she said. There have been many reported cases in which women's IDs to conferences get revoked when they go on business trips overseas. It's also harder for women to manage their copyrights or patents if they change their names. And all this makes it difficult for companies to understand their employees' work history, she added. The issue becomes especially complicated when women, using their maiden names for business, hold high-profile positions in companies. And Kawakami knows of the potential problems from her own experiences. I went through the humiliation of changing my name once when I got married and then, for a second time, when I got divorced. Each time, I had to change all my IDs, bank accounts and even my child's koseki, family register, she said. On one occasion, while traveling to the US, Immigration officials demanded that she provide evidence of her relationship to her daughter. "Stories and papers I wrote under my ex-husband's surname are not credited as my work," she added. "I wouldn't have to go through such humiliation if I had not changed my name. Men do not need to undergo that sort of scrutiny." South Korean doctors submit resignations in spat with government over school admission quotas. Doctors' groups have argued over a government plan to increase the number of medical school admissions by 2,000, starting from next year. Trainee doctors in South Korea began submitting their resignations en masse on Monday in protest of a government medical policy, causing reported delays in surgeries and other treatments at hospitals. Doctors' groups and the government have been squabbling over a government plan to increase the number of medical school admissions by 2,000, starting from next year. Health authorities say it is urgent to have more doctors, considering South Korea's fast-aging population. They say the number of doctors in the country relative to the size of the population is among the lowest in the developed world. But doctors' groups say the government must use available resources to raise medical fees and resolve other problems first. Some doctors say raising admissions could result in unnecessary medical treatments because of a competition among doctors and could burden the public health insurance plan. On Monday, trainee doctors at the country's 5 major hospitals began submitting letters of resignation before formally walking off their jobs on Tuesday. Their association, the Korea Intern Resident Association, decided on the collective action during an emergency meeting last week. Seoul's Asan Medical Center said a number of interns and resident doctors there submitted resignations and that it was trying to reschedule surgeries and other treatments for some patients. Seoul's Severance Hospital said some of its trainee doctors also handed in resignations and suggested it could rearrange surgery schedules as well. South Korean media reported that hundreds of trainee doctors at other hospitals also submitted resignations. Reports said some hospitals canceled or put off planned cancer surgeries, childbirths and other procedures in which trainees assist senior doctors. No major troubles in the country's medical services were immediately reported. The health ministry said it was trying to find out how many of the trainee doctors at the 5 hospitals, estimated at about 2,700 in local media, submitted their resignations. South Korea has about 140,000 professional doctors. The Korea Medical Association, which represents doctors, said it plans to hold rallies in support of the trainees but has not decided whether to join their walkouts. Vice Health Minister Park Min-soo expressed deep worries and regrets over the action. Park, citing a medical law, said the government ordered the trainees to continue working. Earlier on Monday, Prime Minister Han Duck-soo said the government will take steps to prevent the action from undermining the care of emergency patients. He said more than 400 emergency medical treatment centers across South Korea will stay open around the clock, and the government will deploy military doctors if the situation worsens. A telephone survey of 1,002 adults last week showed that 76% of the respondents said they believe the government's plan to increase medical school admissions has more positive aspects, while 16% thought it has more negative aspects, according to the polling station, the Gallup Korea. A margin of error was 3.1 percentage points. The collective action, by trainee doctors, is like holding the people hostages so I don't support them, Kim Sung-bum, 75. Said at a Seoul railway station. I think it would be desirable for them to make a compromise with the government.
The World Health Organization voiced alarm on Tuesday, February 20th, at the rapid spread of measles, with more than 306,000 cases reported worldwide last year, a 79% increase from 2022. "We in the measles world are extremely concerned," said Natasha Crowcroft, a WHO technical advisor on measles and rubella. She stressed though that measles cases are typically dramatically underreported, and that the real number was surely far higher. To get more accurate figures, the UN Health Agency models the numbers each year, with its latest estimate indicating that there were 9.2 million cases and 136,216 measles deaths in 2022. Such modeling has not yet been done for last year, but Crowcroft pointed out that 2022 had already seen a 43% jump in deaths from the year before. Given the ballooning case numbers, we would anticipate an increase in deaths in 2023 as well, she told journalists in Geneva, via video link from Cairo. "This year is going to be very challenging. She warned that more than half of all countries globally are currently believed to be at high risk of measles outbreaks by the end of the year. And some 142 million children are estimated to be susceptible to falling ill. Measles is a highly contagious disease caused by a virus that attacks mainly children. The most serious complications include blindness, brain swelling, diarrhea, and severe respiratory infections. A major cause of the swelling numbers is the backsliding immunization coverage, Crowcroft said. At least 95% of children need to be fully vaccinated against the disease in a locality to prevent outbreaks. But global vaccination rates have slipped to 83%. There is a great deal of inequity in the distribution of cases, and even more so when it comes to deaths. Crowcroft pointed out that 92% of all children who die from measles live among less than a quarter of the global population, mainly in very low-income countries.
EU agrees to blacklist Chinese firms for first time in latest Russian sanctions package. 3 mainland businesses and 1 from Hong Kong will be sanctioned after Hungary agreed not to veto the measure. Last year, China convinced Europe to remove companies from a blacklist after providing assurances that exports would be stopped. The European Union has for the first time agreed to blacklist Chinese companies as part of its attempts to hobble Russia's military. On Wednesday, ambassadors from the Union's 27 member states greenlit its 13th package of sanctions since the Russian invasion of Ukraine began almost 2 years ago. As part of this, 3 mainland Chinese entities and 1 registered in Hong Kong will be barred from doing business with European counterparts. They stand accused of helping Russian buyers access goods with dual military and civilian uses that were made in Europe, but banned from being exported to Russia by the EU. Hungary, a close partner of Beijing, decided not to veto the package, after its passage was delayed last week. A diplomat familiar with the discussions said Hungary had requested more time last week. The diplomat continued, "In the past days, we had received clear signs from Hungary that they would not oppose the sanctions package. Corper, the ambassadors group that passed the measures, approved the package very quickly, without discussion, except one statement from Hungary. Lawyers will now prepare a text for final adoption before February 24th, the second anniversary of the start of the war." The 3 mainland Chinese companies are Guangzhou Ausse Technology Company Limited, Shenzhen Bigwang Trading Company Limited, Yalufa Electronics Limited. The Hong Kong company is RG Solutions Limited. They are part of a group of 193 named entities on the latest round of sanctions, including firms from Turkey, Kazakhstan, North Korea, and India, bringing the total number blacklisted to almost 2,000. "I welcome the agreement on our 13th sanctions package against Russia. We must keep degrading Vladimir Putin's war machine," said European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. For China, it marks the end of a long quest to prevent its companies from being blacklisted over the Ukraine war. Last summer, officials removed 5 Chinese entities from a previous sanctions package after intense lobbying from diplomats in Europe and assurances the firms would stop supplying Russia. EU leaders directly raised the names of 13 other Chinese entities they said were providing Moscow with sanctioned goods with President Xi Jinping during a summit in Beijing in December. The Chinese mission to the EU did not immediately respond to a request for comment. In an interview last June, after the Chinese companies had been removed from the list, Beijing's ambassador to the EU Fu Kong said, "We're glad that the Chinese companies have been removed from the list, and it shows that dialogue can work." The European Commission last year introduced a nuclear option that would allow the bloc to target countries as a whole, rather than individual entities, should there be persistent flouting of sanctions. However, with EU unity on Ukraine fraying at the seams, particularly on sanctions, it appears unlikely that the unanimity required to adopt such a measure will be reached. While Hungary did not block the latest package, its officials have made clear that they disagree with it. "There is no reason to veto it," Hungarian Foreign Minister Peter Szijjártó said after a meeting with his ministerial counterparts on Monday evening, but he added that the EU is making the wrong decision.
More multinational companies are choosing Singapore over Hong Kong to set up their headquarters, a Bloomberg report found. The report published by Bloomberg Intelligence on Wednesday, February 21, details Singapore's rise in the competition for the title of Asia's premier business destination. It highlighted that Singapore hosted regional headquarters for 4,200 multinational firms in 2023, extending its lead over Hong Kong, which has 1,336. Companies that set up headquarters in Singapore include Microsoft, Google, FedEx, Rolls-Royce and Mead Johnson. Other companies, such as online fashion retailer Shein and social media firm TikTok, also have business hubs here. The report also noted that many Chinese companies looking to hedge geopolitical risks and broaden their reach choose Singapore. Hong Kong has lost the race to be international businesses' preferred choice for Asia headquarters, as more global and even Chinese companies choose Singapore because of its better relations with the West, broader talent pool, diversified economy, and tax incentives, the report said. Companies may rank Singapore higher in terms of political stability and freedom amid elevated geopolitical risks in the region. While Hong Kong positioned itself as China's finance center by containing political protests and adhering to the country's COVID-0 policy during the pandemic, Singapore highlighted its independence and emerged as the preferred site for international business offices, it added. The report also said that while Hong Kong has lower standard corporate tax rate of 16.5%, there are Singapore programs that can cut the state's 17% tax rate to 13.5% or less for some activities. In addition, Singapore has targeted incentives for foreign companies looking to set up regional hubs, an approach Bloomberg said is paying off. Aside from companies that have set up headquarters in Singapore, several companies are also establishing or expanding operations here. This includes tech companies Alibaba and Huawei Technologies, as well as electric vehicle maker NIO. Nvidia hits $2 trillion valuation as AI frenzy grips Wall Street. Nvidia hit $2 trillion in market value on Friday, February 23, riding on an insatiable demand for its chips that made the Silicon Valley firm the pioneer of the generative artificial intelligence boom. The milestone followed another bumper revenue forecast from the chip designer that drove up its market value by $277 billion on Thursday, Wall Street's largest one-day gain on record. Its rapid ascent in the past year has led analysts to draw parallels to the picks and shovels providers during the gold rush of the 1800s, as Nvidia's chips are used by almost all generative AI players from ChatGPT maker OpenAI to Google. That has helped the company vault from $1 trillion to $2 trillion market value in just around 9 months, the fastest among US companies, and in less than half the time it took tech giants Apple and Microsoft. For AI companies today, the leaders of the sector, what's going to be binding for them is not going to be demand. It's just going to be their capacity to answer the surging demand, said Ipek Oskardeskaya, senior analyst at Swissquote Bank.
South Korean conglomerates are expanding birth incentive programs to help boost the country's record low fertility rate, amid mixed expectations about their effectiveness. Underwear maker Singbangwool announced on February 22 that the company will provide up to 100 million won $100,000 to employees who are expecting babies. Under the company's birth incentive scheme, an employee can receive 30 million won for the first child, another 30 million won for the second, and 40 million won for the third. The company added that it will provide up to 3 million won to employees who need in vitro fertilization. The low birth rate is an important task for our society to overcome. The company will take responsibility and put all out efforts to help the country increase the fertility rate, a spokesman from Singbangwool said. The announcement comes after construction company Buyong Group said earlier in February that it would provide employees with 100 million won per birth, the highest fertility cash incentive offered among local corporations. Buyong has delivered a combined 7 billion won to 70 employees who had one child or more since January 2021, the company said. The government is also supporting companies' birth incentive programs. Last week, President Yoon Suk-yeol instructed his aides to provide tax benefits and other support measures to encourage companies to launch birth incentive programs. Despite the joint public-private efforts on birth incentive programs, many workers remain skeptical about whether money alone can make a difference. My company has recently decided to raise financial support for employees expecting babies. But I don't think that money alone can make employees have babies. They don't want to feel guilty about using full parental leave, and policies that can ensure flexible hours are also absent, Ms. Kim, a working mother of a 7-year-old boy, said on condition of anonymity. Some have raised concerns that the government's tax benefit can lead to job polarization. The recent news involving large companies' birth incentive programs and the government's plan to provide tax benefits worry me because I am not eligible for them, said 30-year-old Lee, who works at a small-sized company. According to the National Tax Service, only 2.3% of employees in the country received financial support from their company's birth incentive programs. Birth incentive programs by companies provide some financial help, but they will not have a great impact on spurring a meaningful increase in the country's fertility rate, as only a few employees can benefit from them, a human resources department worker at a local conglomerate said. Rather, a birth incentive program may become a great tool for a company to build a positive brand image. Meanwhile, South Korea's fertility rate, the number of children that are expected to be born to a woman over her lifetime, hit a record low of 0.78 in 2022, and the figure for 2023 was expected to dip further.